Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to the channel. And today I'm doing my review of Survivor Series 1998. Starting off the evening, we're going to go to our first match of the night. It is Mankind versus Dwayne Gill in a WWE Championship Tournament matchup. Number one, I thought it was an okay matchup. One interesting thing I would say is that Dwayne Gill would later on be known as Gilbert, kind of a insult to Goldberg, which I thought was kind of hilarious. Um, like I said, it was an okay matchup. Mankind was pretty much keeping the pace throughout the entire match, with Mankind ultimately hitting his signature double arm DDT on Dwayne Gill, pinning him for the three. And moving on in the WWE Championship Tournament is Mankind. Hats off to Mankind for getting the win in this matchup. Moving on from that, we go into our next match of the night. It is another WWE Championship Tournament matchup. It is Jeff Jarrett versus Al Snow. Again, I thought this was an okay matchup. Back and forth matchup between both Jarrett and Al Snow, with Al Snow keeping the pace of the match. Snow hits a devastating DDT on Jarrett, and then Snow hits Jarrett with a weapon. The referee doesn't see it, pins for the three, and your winner of the match is Al Snow. Hats off to Al Snow for getting the win in that matchup. Moving on from that, we go into our next match of the night. It is another WWE Championship Tournament matchup. It is the Big Boss Man versus Stone Cold Steve Austin. I thought it was an okay matchup. Back and forth matchup between both Boss Man and Stone Cold Steve Austin, with Austin keeping the pace of the match. Boss Man then hits Austin with the nightstick, and your winner of the match by disqualification is Stone Cold Steve Austin. Hats off to Stone Cold Steve Austin for getting the win in that matchup. Moving on from that, we go into our next match of the night as well. It is another WWE Championship Tournament matchup. It is Steven Regal versus X-Pac. I thought it was an okay matchup. Back and forth matchup between both Regal and X-Pac, with X-Pac keeping the pace of the match. Regal hits a double arm suplex off the top rope on X-Pac. X-Pac then gets up, hits a spin kick on Regal in the middle of the ring. X-Pac then hits a Bronco Buster in the corner on Regal. X-Pac and then Regal both fight on the outside. Referee calls for the bell. The match ends in a double countout. Sergeant Slaughter makes his way down to the ring, says the match will continue. X-Pac then leaves the match, and the match ends up ending in a double countout. Moving on from that, we go into our next match of the night. It is Ken Shamrock versus Goldust in another WWE Championship Tournament matchup. I thought it was an okay matchup. Back and forth matchup between both Shamrock and Goldust, with Shamrock keeping the pace of the match. And Shamrock ultimately applies his signature ankle lock on Goldust, and your winner of the match by submission. And moving on in the tournament is Ken Shamrock. Moving on from that, we go into our next match of the night as well. It is another WWE Championship Tournament matchup. It is The Rock versus Big Boss Man. This was pretty much a glorified squash match. Rock was keeping the pace throughout the match, with Rock ultimately hitting a quick roll-up on the Big Boss Man, pins him for the three, and your winner of the match and moving on in the tournament is The Rock. Hats off to The Rock for getting the win in that matchup. Moving on from that, we go into our next match of the night. It is another WWE Championship Tournament matchup. It is Kane versus The Undertaker. I thought this was a good match. Back and forth matchup between both Kane and The Undertaker, with Taker keeping the pace of the match. Kane hits a devastating power slam on The Undertaker. Kane and Undertaker both exchange in the middle of the ring. Kane then hits a choke slam on The Undertaker, but The Undertaker quickly gets up, hits a tombstone on Kane, pins him for the three, and your winner of the match and moving on in the WWE Championship Tournament is The Undertaker. Hats off to The Undertaker for getting the win in this matchup. Moving on from that, we go into our next match of the night. It is another WWE Championship Tournament matchup. It is Mankind versus Al Snow. I thought this was an okay matchup. Back and forth matchup between Mankind and Al Snow, with Al Snow keeping the pace of the match. Mankind hits a signature double arm DDT on Al Snow, and then Mankind ultimately applies a mandible claw on Al Snow, and your winner of the match is Mankind. Hats off to Mankind for getting the win in this matchup. Moving on from that, we go into our next match of the night. It is another WWE Championship Tournament matchup. It is Ken Shamrock versus The Rock. I thought this was a good match. Back and forth matchup between both Shamrock and The Rock, with The Rock keeping the pace of the match. Boss Man is here. Shamrock hits a Hurricane Rana on The Rock in the middle of the ring. Shamrock then applies an ankle lock on The Rock, but The Rock breaks the hold. Rock hits a devastating DDT on Shamrock in the middle of the ring. Rock then hits his signature People's Elbow on Shamrock for a near fall. Boss Man then throws a nice stick into the ring. for Shamrock, but Rock ends up catching the nightstick. Rock hits Shamrock with the nightstick. The referee doesn't see it. Pins for the 3. And your winner of the match and moving on in the WWE Championship Tournament is The Rock. Hats off to The Rock for getting the win in this matchup. Moving on from that, we go into our next match of the night as well. It is for the WWE Women's Championship. It is Jacqueline versus Sable. I thought it was an okay matchup. Back and forth matchup between both Jacqueline and Sable, with Sable keeping the pace of the match. Sable hits a devastating Sable bomb on Mark Marrow on the outside. Then Sable hits another Sable bomb on Jacqueline in the middle of the ring. Pins her for the 3. And your winner of the match, and at that time new WWE Women's Champion, is Sable. Hats off to Sable for getting the win in that matchup. Moving on from that, we go into our next match of the night. It is another WWE Championship Tournament matchup, the semifinals. It is Mankind versus Stone Cold Steve Austin. Thought it was a good match. Back and forth match between Mankind and Austin, with Austin keeping the pace of the match. Mr. McMahon makes his way down to the ring. Austin then hits a Lou Thesz press on Mankind. Mankind and Austin both exchange in the middle of the ring. Mankind then hits Austin with the double arm DDT on a chair. Austin then gets up, hits a stunner on Mankind. McMahon then attacks the referee. Mankind then applies a mandible claw on Stone Cold Steve Austin. Austin then gets up, hits another stunner on Mankind. Briscoe is here. He ends up hitting Austin with a chair shot. Mankind then goes for the cover, pins for the 3, and your winner of the match is Mankind. Moving on from that, we go into our next match of the night. It is another semi-final WWE Championship Tournament matchup. It is The Rock versus The Undertaker. I thought it was a good match. Back and forth matchup between The Rock and The Undertaker, with The Rock keeping the pace of the match. Rock hits a Samoan drop on The Undertaker in the middle of the ring. Bossman is here. Rock then hits a DDT on The Undertaker. Kane is here as well. Kane then hits a chokeslam on The Rock in the middle of the ring. And your winner of the match by disqualification is The Rock. Hats off to The Rock for getting the win in this matchup. Moving on from that, we go into our next match of the night as well. It is New Age Outlaws versus the Headbangers versus Mark Henry and D'Lo Brown. I thought it was an okay matchup. Back and forth matchup with everybody involved. Mark Henry and D'Lo Brown were keeping the pace of the match. D'Lo Brown ends up hitting a devastating spinebuster on Billy Gunn, but Billy Gunn ends up hitting a pile driver, pins for the 3, and your winners of the match are the New Age Outlaws. Hats off to the New Age Outlaws for getting the win in this matchup. Moving on from that, we go into our next match of the night as well. It is the main event of Survivor Series 1998. It is The Rock versus Mankind in the WWE Championship matchup, for the vacant WWE Championship, I should say. The match itself was a really good matchup. Back and forth matchup between The Rock and Mankind. Rock was keeping the pace of the match. Rock hits a people's elbow on Mankind for a near fall. Mankind then hits a double arm DDT in the middle of the ring on The Rock. Mankind then applies a mandible claw on The Rock. Rock then gets out of that hold. Then Rock hits a rock bottom on Mankind for a near fall. Rock then applies a sharpshooter on Mankind. McMahon then sounds for the bell. And your winner of the match is The Rock. After the match, Rock embraces both Shane and Vince McMahon. And obviously this is Rock's big heel turn in his career. So, like I said, it wasn't a bad match. It was a really good matchup. Survivor Series 1998 was definitely not your traditional Survivor Series. There was no traditional Survivor Series matchups on this card at all. Mainly it was all about the WWE Championship Tournament because the title was actually vacant. The main event was good. Rock versus Mankind. I mean, awesome main event. But there was a couple matches on here I could have done without, to be honest with you. I mean, Mankind versus Dwayne Gill, could have done without. I mean, everybody knows Gillberg, but could have done without that. Jeff Jarrett versus Al Snow, again, I could have done without that as well. A couple matches were decent. I mean, I thought Steven Regal versus X-Pac was a really good matchup. Shamrock versus Goldust was really good as well. Shamrock versus The Rock was also pretty good, as well as Undertaker versus Kane. But if I had to give Survivor Series 1998 a solid rating from 1 out of 10, I'm going to have to give it a solid 5 at best, man. There was no traditional Survivor Series matchups. The main event was really good, as well as the Undertaker versus Kane match. But other than that, I had to give it a solid 5 at best. But this is my review of Survivor Series 1998. I hope you guys are out there staying safe. Be careful, and remember, stay classic. Peace.